Yes, people, welcome back to the channel. 12th Man is back, and I've got a very, very special episode for you guys today. Joining me is singer and comedian Mickey P. Kerr. You may know him from Britain's Got Talent, finalist. Mickey, absolute pleasure to have you on, mate. How are you, bro?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Dan, and it's good to be here, mate. Thanks for having me.
Nah, come on, absolute pleasure. Listen, I'm not here to talk about Britain's Got Talent, but people will definitely recognise you from that, as of course I did. What was that experience like, mate? I've got to ask because I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, it was good. It's good and bad. Like a lot of things, it's quite controlled. It's a bit like going to war, really. They say like soldiers spend 90% of the time being really bored, and 10% is like sheer terror. Do you know what I mean? So, because you're performing to like 15 million people or something, so no, you can't. You can't really practice for that. But yeah, it was good. It's done my career a lot of good, and I messed the final up, but don't watch that. But the rest of it went okay.
Well, listen, I loved your audition. I loved your semi-final performance in particular, and I thought you were great in the final, I must say. And sometimes it's real, isn't it? And you come across as a real person. And it was Joe who actually got me in touch with yourself. He's a big Leeds fan, and I know that you are. So it'll be rude for me not to ask you about Leeds this season and how confident you are about getting back up to the Premier League, mate. What's your thoughts so far on what Leeds have been up to under Daniel Farke?
Well, we were chatting about it earlier, and I said I kind of prefer it in the Championship because we're a big club in the Championship, and we tend to win. When you become a bottom six Premier League team, you not too fussed on going up last season. It was nice to go out of Wembley, have a day out. We had scored in Wembley for it's like the third time we've done it, in the playoffs. We hadn't scored since the 1992. Cantona scored our last goal at Wembley, which says a lot how long ago that was. But this season, last season was great, by the way. We got 90 points, really enjoyed it. Stadium's bouncing, stadium's full. This season, we've sold our heritage, Archie Gray, which is just, I think most clubs are in this position, really, unless you're in the top 3 or 4, really. There's a hierarchy now, isn't there? And you can't keep all your good players anymore. Archie Gray is, part of the Gray dynasty, so it's really he's only 18, So that's heartbreaking, to be honest with you. We've also sold Jorginho Rutter. I don't know what Brighton fans are making of him. I've heard a few negative comments maybe from them, but he's brilliant. He's only a young boy. He's a great player. So he's not great in front of goal. So, whether he can hit the ground running in the Premier League is another question because you play against the best players in the world. It's hard. We've also sold Somerville to West Ham, and we are weakened. We haven't brought in that quality. So this year it feels like top 2. I'm not sure. Top 6, definitely. We've got the squad to do it. But whether or not we'll make top 2, I'm not sure. It's a long season. It's 46 games, so you've always got a bit longer. It's not, you can't get too carried away with a good start. And likewise, if it's not quite happening at the start of the season, you don't need to throw in the towel as quickly. But the way I see it now is a certain amount of points. Can you average 2 points a game? Really, I think that's going to be enough. Ipswich produced a miracle last year.
Yeah,
I tell you now, I won't swap places with them because they've got 3 points. They've got 3 draws.
Yeah, I think so.
Which is good. It's decent, but finding one win's hard. And really, what Ipswich have done is they've been winning. Getting on for 2/3 of the games, and now they're going to win if they're really lucky. 1/4 of the games, and they might end up winning 1/10. They might. It's out. Yeah, is it worth going up? It's that the gap. We're going to talk about it. We're going to get into it about well, I'll let you frame this chat, but we're going to look at the bigger picture here, Dan.
100%. And listen, this is why I brought you on. It was actually Joe who obviously introduced, as I said earlier, and I wanted to get you on because you've got this book, Football, the People's Shame, How to Revolutionise a National Sport. Look, it's there.
There it is.
There, and that is what it looks like. I'm going to let you have the mic, and I might have some questions as we go, if I'm honest, Mick, because I think it's going to be really interesting. This, I looked at the video previously. I don't think that anybody or everybody has seen that video, but I think we'll just pretend that nobody knows anything about this and just go straight into it. So this is something that you're really passionate about, isn't it?
Yeah. I've been working on this book for 3 years. It's finally done. It's out in December. And the idea is really to unite English football supporters against what is really an oppressive system, and challenge the governing bodies of English football, because I've developed a theory of how English football can be governed as a public service, and a really profitable one. And this idea is going to seem really unrealistic at the start, but it's not as far-fetched as you might think. The idea is to politicise English fandom, and to do two things that English football supporters aren't doing, and that's think big and think long term. Because we're all inside our club bubbles, we thinking short term, about the next game, the next run of games, and that's good. It's what we use football for, a bit of escapism, and football's very tribal. There's nothing wrong with that, but the other side of the coin is this: we've taken our eye off the bigger picture. No one's looking at the bigger picture. And what I'm going to introduce is a concept called English fandom, which is just all of us, English football and culture. And that's what we're not looking after. And that's what's actually changing. We are being changed by the commercialization of English football. And the way that it's been governed is it's a joke. It's a joke, really. So what I'm going to propose is a genuine revolution. I think that when you look at the wider economic landscape and the political landscape, I think football is actually not this impenetrable fortress. It's actually a weak point in the system, and I think we can take it. And I'm not just talking about football clubs. I'm talking about all the industries related to English football: broadcasting, shirt manufacturing, gambling, brewery system as well. We can take this, and if we do, the ramifications would be huge, actually. But we can run football as a highly profitable public service, like I said. And clubs are clubs by their very nature. The idea of privatization in football, I just don't think it works. The Americans don't do it. You look at the American sporting systems. Yep. Completely different to ours. They don't use the same philosophy at all. So what I'd like to do, Dan, actually, is the book is. I'll show you it again. I'm hoping that upon completion of this video, you'll go onto the link and download and get a pre-order of this. That's the idea, because the book says it better than I can. I've worked with a lot of academics and a lot of journalists on this, and I've had some amazing editors. I've got the publishing deal and stuff like that. So it's the book says it a lot better than I can. I'm just an average fan. You know what I mean? But I've gone on this journey over 3 years, and it's working out. And everything that needs to happen for this revolution to happen has so far happened. But part of that is, can I get out there on the podcast network? And because I reckon there's about 10 million of us in this country that are really passionate and connected to their clubs. So the more I can speak to, the more chance it's got, So yeah, what we're going to do, mate, it's split into 3 parts is the book. The first part describes the journey of English football, the political journey, which exists a bit under a cloak of invisibility. No one seems to know. So we're going to unveil that really basically now. Part 1 does that in the book. Part 2 is how to reverse all the processes that have basically, that have shut us out of our own clubs. And then part 3 looks at English football and culture, but I think we can park that for today, because I'm wary of cognitive overload, which is I'm a teacher still, a primary school teacher, so as well as a comedian. So that just means you're teaching too much. So I want to try and keep this as simple as I can and as basic as I can, because it's a lot of information. Is this? So are you ready to do it, Dan?
Let's go through it, man. Let's go through it.
Mate. And if it ever gets weird or you don't understand it, just pipe up, because other people will be feeling the same. So what we start with is the Victorian way of looking at English football, because they're the ones that created it for us, and it was their philosophy, which is very similar to what the Americans think about football, about sport, sorry, that preserve football as this spiritual thing that's been handed down through the generations. And I think that's what's been diluted now, definitely, because the Victorians saw football as a sport, not a business. It's a sport first before it's a business, which is exactly the same way the Americans do sport in the modern age. And today that's been reversed. Football is really a business before it's a sport. And there's a lot of all the commercialization. These people are parasites, really. That's the way I see it now.
Yeah.
But well, the Victorians, it's all about fair competition. I'm going to go through some regulations they had. They had a wage cap for a start. They implemented it in 1901. So they let free markets reign for a little bit, but then realized this doesn't really work. You know, if we have too much money in one club or a few set of clubs, it's not really fair. They also shared gate receipts as well. So bigger clubs, you know, in bigger urban centres, obviously had more people going to watch the football than the smaller provincial towns. But their idea was that let's keep this fair, you know. So every time you played a football game with someone, you know, you shared the gate receipts. Really egalitarian, really fair, really sporting integrity meant a lot to them. And in the 1880s, going back a little bit here, but from 1901, but the football was professionalized in 1885, and it was a business model was being created because it was so popular. People would just go in and they wanted to expand stadiums. So they said, listen, we want to set up as public limited companies because it de-risks you. You know, if you lose money, if it all goes wrong, the business loses the money, not the individual. So the FA said, okay, you can set up as public limited companies, but we can have some regulation to make sure that clubs are still community assets. So they create something called Rule 34, really important piece of Victorian regulation. And that meant Rule 34 meant that shareholders weren't allowed to take money out of football clubs. You just couldn't do it. You weren't allowed to take anything out. These were community assets run as non-profit organisations, really. So you had a lot of regulation to control wages, to control the economic landscape, making it very fair, and you couldn't take money out of clubs. If a club was liquidated, you had to give the money to charity as well. So, you know, all these fail-safes really were to stop people from exploiting the football club, really, to stop you know, individuals doing that. So that's what we had. That's what the Victorians created for us. And you know, that's not been adhered to now. You know, Rule 34 actually has never been receded. It's just been bypassed. Why did football change? You know, that's a big question. How did it change? Football changed. The simple reason is this: football changed because the wider political landscape changed. We can go back to the key decade, these 1970s. You see that, you know, in the post-war period, you have this, you know, quite collectivized economic rationale, really. You know, Keynesianism is what it's called. The guy who invented this kind of system where it's you got the NHS, you know, the kind of the state looking after people and collectivism, really. Even though the country was in a lot of debt, but they still spent a lot of money on public services and created this new economic model. But by the time you get to the 1970s, that started going wrong. And in 1970, like, you know, oil is cheap and unemployment is low. But by 1980, that's reversed. You've got, you know, oil is expensive and unemployment's high. So the country needed to change. It needed a change. And what you got was this Keynesian kind of Keynes is out. This collectivism is out and this individualism is in. You've got the 1978 winter of discontent. You know, the country, we couldn't afford enough oil to run the country. You had a 3-day week. You know, older listeners will know about that. And what it was triggered by an oil crisis in the Middle East, actually, in the mid 70s, and that massively affected this country because, like I said, it was hard to run the economy. The country was in dire need of reform, and what you had was Thatcherism coming in 1979, and something called neoliberalism, which is like this philosophy, an economic philosophy, and we're still using it now to this day. That's basically deregulation, a lot of privatization. So it's reversing what Keynes did. Privatization, deregulation, and free market economics. So opening up to international investors, you know, and that's massively impacted football. So the wider economic landscape, changed the footballing landscape as well. Football moved with it. It moved with the times, as it always has done. So what's the key year? The key year in football, in English football, is 1983. Most people would say 1992 with the formation of the Premier League.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen in a vacuum. It really took about 15 years in the making. It's 1983 is the key year. What you've got in the late 1970s is as well, you've got advertising slowly creeping in. So we're thinking that it's an era of big business, individualism, like I said. Let's make some money. And 1972, I think there was a sponsorship ban. Yeah, but it came in 1977. I think it was Derby County. Derby County were one of three clubs. It wasn't the bigger clubs that were lobbying the FA. It was a few smaller ones. But football, there wasn't really the big six back then. It was far more egalitarian. It was far more equal. Derby County were a massive team in the 70s.
Yeah, there was much more competition back then. I mean, you look at the team winning stuff back then. You're like, wow, that wouldn't happen nowadays.
No, it was really spread out in terms of like the winners, the victorious teams. It wasn't all concentrated. You had like great players like Kevin Keegan played for Southampton. It was Derby County, Nottingham Forest under the Clough era. And Liverpool did start to come and take over in the 70s, 80s. But like I said, there was a lot more. Well, the book goes through it actually with the stats going into detail about the monopolisation process. But yeah, it was far more equal back then. But anyway, 77, they started allowing advertising. So you see this deregulation that we mentioned earlier about the economic switch in ideology. And you've got advertising coming in, only in dribs and drabs at first. And you've got sponsorships on, you might remember the early sponsors. Liverpool had, what did they have? Oh,
Candy. Years ago.
Yeah, I remember that one. There was one before it as well. But it eludes me. But you've got the sponsorships coming in on the shirts. And what else you've got? Because technology really impacts football as well. You've got technological advancements. And what we're seeing in the late 70s and early 80s is broadcasting. So why is the 1983 the key year? Well, it's the first year that you've got regular broadcasting. So you've got this duopoly of the BBC and ITV, and they're competing for contracts because you're getting it aired weekly now. It's not the odd game. Match of the Day has been happening since the 60s, but that's weekly roundup. This is live football weekly. That's the 1983-1984 season. Money's coming into the game, and you've got club owners thinking we could do with some of this. This is good. 1983 is also the year that the gate receipts stopped getting scrapped. The gate receipts sharing, that was scrapped. We talked about the Victorians brought that in. So 1983 is the first year that they went, we'll just keep our own gate receipts. Thank you very much. So again, we've got this era of individualism, the bigger clubs wanting more for themselves. It's a wider theory, a wider economic theory that the wider political landscape was harboring, and football, like I said, is affected by that. But the main reason 1983 is the key year is that's the first time that Rule 34, we remember about the protective regulation that we had, that was the first time it was bypassed. And it was the Spurs chairman, the old enemy, it was Irving Scholar.
He was that. Okay.
Yeah, so he handed to Sugar, actually. Yeah, so he's the one before Sugar. Irving Scholar wrote to the FA and he said, I don't want to do Rule 34. I want to take money out. He says simply. And they didn't bother to respond. David Conn is the journalist for this. He's done some great stuff on Rule 34. Really great journalist. So the FA didn't respond. So he just went ahead with his commercialisation plan. And how he did it was this. He set up a holding company. So Spurs is the parent company. He set up a holding company. So money was funneled from the parent company into the holding company. But guess who owns the holding company? And so that's how they got around the regulation. They just, that's how they extracted funds from football clubs. And Spurs were the first to float on the stock exchange. But what you've got as a result of that, but what you've got as well as the advertising with the sponsorship, because it's broadcasted, you've got suddenly millions of people are watching the game. And my missus is back. I thought you all right? Yeah. Just I might have done something wrong. Just checking. System's all right. I'm busy. But anyway, they.
I think just quickly, Mickey. I think there as well. You said that the Rule 34. I think we've been seeing with the Todd Bowley era now, and with Sheikh Mansour and the Cronkies and the Glazers, that this word loopholes are being used quite a lot. They found the loophole. They found the loophole. It seems that we're kind of looking back there at Rule 34 was maybe ignoring it, but maybe they've found the loophole back then, or that's the equivalent of a loophole back then, if you get me.
Yeah, I mean, there's the thing is, it's a really simple thing to think, but we just got to simplify the financial landscape, and because there's too many fucking loopholes. So there is, it just creates so much chaos. Just stop the loopholes from happening. Just create better regulation. But Rule 34 wasn't. They didn't even bother with the loophole. They just ignored it. They just bypassed it, and it was forgotten about and put on the scrap heap and completely ignored. So, and what you've got again with the sponsorship is suddenly millions of viewers. And by 1987, it took 10 years. Every single, babe, I'm busy here. Every single, sorry about this.
No, don't be. It's funny.
I don't have any, I don't have any authority in my own house at all. Every single club had a sponsor on the top, in the top flight. It took 10 years to normalise. So you've got this, the technology is changing. It's advancing, and also we're seeing better pitches as well. Better, there were quagmires really in the 70s, but by the end of the 80s, they're starting to get a bit of a handle on it. It comes from the US. It's US golf courses, the drainage systems. That's where it all comes from there. And what we've got is English football's in dire need of reform in the 80s because you've got we're banned from Europe with the Heysel disaster. And hooliganism is really embedding itself.
Yeah.
People are not going. So it was this really popular sport. But then, I think it's the lowest levels since 1915 in the early 80s. And, that's because a lot of people were over in the trenches, Football was stopped in 15. Because actually, to a bit of a tangent this, but the First World War, I learned this recently, they didn't have the sign-ups they wanted. That's why football went on until 1915, and that's why Kitch did that. Your country needs you. There was no one was going for it. No one was actually. They wouldn't get that many sign-ups. So in 1915, that all changes. They're panicking, thinking we need men here, and football stopped. But and in the 1980s, that's the lowest level since then. And you've got these cages coming up, and they look like prisons, really, don't they? When you look back on it. And all this ends up leading to Hillsborough in 1989. So that's really key for English football. The Taylor report afterwards came out and said, listen, we've got to go to all-seater stadiums. And they decided, the Tory party decided that they would get football clubs to fund that themselves. The Labour opposition were trying to use the pools money, trying to use public money. So the pools was a previous form of betting, really popular.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, the football pools, they were bringing in I think it was £250 million a year. So this is a lot of money in the late 80s. And they said that could be used to help transition into all-seater stadiums. But the Tory party said, no, and football's been thrust more and more into the private sphere here. We talk about individualism. That's this is happening more and more. And the really key year as well is 1990, because that's the World Cup, and it's still the best World Cup. I was born in 81. For those of us, the football was pretty shit, apparently. I don't really remember that. But, I just remember it being really magical, And in 90, I've never got over that semi-final defeat, actually, against Germany. But Murdoch sees this, and Murdoch is losing a lot of money. He sees 25 million people tune in, and suddenly English football is on the front foot again. We've got what we were. It was the 80s was a bad period in terms of engagement, but suddenly, wow, the nation. And Murdoch sees this, he thinks, right, because he's losing billions in his Sky services, cinema services. Sorry, with Sky. Sky's in loads of debt. It's not doing very well. So he takes a punt on English football, and he's the pioneer is actually Berlusconi. He was doing it. He was doing the Serie A stuff, since 1980. So he's the broadcasting mogul, really. He's the pioneer. And interestingly, Murdoch's getting loads of political favours from the Broadcasting 1990 Act. He's not basically his satellite kind of, again, we've got technology improving, satellite TV coming in.
Sky TV, and all that.
And this and the BBC and the ITV have got this duopoly. I think ITV had bid about 48 million from 88 to 92, so a lot of money. The money's coming in, and then Murdoch changes that in 92. But this is a monopoly. It's not supposed to happen. Neil Kinnock's the Labour is the opposition leader for Labour in 1992, and he's going to win the election. Is Kinnock, and he's threatening to take Murdoch to the Monopoly Commission because you're not allowed to do this. It's a monopoly. You should not be one company doing this. So Murdoch throws all his weight behind the Tories in 92 because he's got these newspapers, and they get a surprise victory. So through that victory in 1992, Murdoch's given political protection. He's not taken to the Monopoly Commission. And, really what you've got is the foundations of the Premier League have been forged in this perfect storm. In the end, it's, you've got this technological advancement and the wider political landscape. And it's all worked in Murdoch's favour. And we get this cultural shift in English football towards commercialism. So that's how it's all set up, the very basics of how it's all set up. And if you don't mind now, Dan, I'd like to talk about monopolisation because that's exactly what we've seen since the Premier League era began. Broadcasting money first entered the landscape in 1965. And it sounds crazy to say this, but it was shared equally between all 92 clubs.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that just goes to show the perspective, the philosophical kind of change, the ideological change from collectivism, everybody, we all matter, and towards big business kind of, monopolies. Yeah. And it was only £5,000, which is such a small amount. Yeah, but it was shared equally. And then what you get in towards the 80s, the ITV deal, it starts becoming a bit more set it towards the top. But in 92, 93, it all goes to the top. And it doesn't just go to the top division. It goes to the top teams in the top division. And the people who kind of, it was the top five back then. It was Liverpool, Everton. It was Arsenal, Man United and Spurs. So they kind of did a deal with Murdoch, really. And they were the ones that shifted from the old First Division into the Premier League. And they were the ones getting the big money. And then what we see is the gap between the best and the rest has just widened, and it's accelerated.
It has.
Yeah, this process, we can all feel it, and it's getting faster. It's getting faster and faster. There's no break on this. Again, another tangent, but the FFP rules, or whatever they're called now.
PSR, FFP, it's all acronyms, isn't it?
and they keep changing. And like we said, there's a lot of loopholes there, but they just do more to protect the on-field dominance of the bigger teams. A lot of this has got to do with the UEFA. They've been threatened. Their power's been threatened with this A22 company who set up the European Super League. And what they're doing really is trying to shore up their relationship with the Big 12, across Europe. So a lot of these rules, that's the cynics version of it. But I think you were right to be cynical about these fair play rules because, it's just not fair at all.
Of course, and I think as well, just quickly, like 92, 93, where you are now on the timeline, obviously the Championship, which used to be called Division 1 when you and I were watching football. I was born in 87, so similar kind of era to yourself, a bit younger. I think then everybody back, I wouldn't have known at the time watching it, but back then you look at it and you think, wow, the Premier League coming in, money has just gone and shot up because Sky TV is now here, and you've got so many channels, not just football being shown on BBC or just on ITV. You've now got whole Sky Sports channels being shown, and even back then, I mean, it's mad now, but back then it was mental when we'd come in, and I think the Premier League completely changed football really from 92 onwards, really, didn't it?
It's a massive revolution. It's in footballing terms, and like I said, it's not happening in a vacuum. It's been set up slowly, really over about 15 years. If that's how long it takes, then that's how long it takes. Because when you look at the bigger picture, it's not a massive amount of time, Yeah. I mean, but we could look 15 years into the future from now, and it feels like a European Super League is definitely inevitable. If you look at the economics, it's definitely happening, and I think it's already happening in our minds as well.
Well, look at the new Champions League format. It's a European Super League, isn't it? It's crazy.
It's slowly but surely they step. When it happens incrementally, you don't notice it as much, and it happens. It becomes more naturalized in your mind. And I think a lot of people are already saying, "Just get rid of the top six. We're better off without them," which is so defeatist. English football is about all of us, and that's what I'm trying to get across, really. But we go towards 92 anyway.
Well, for me, the Big Six. Sorry, Mick. The Big Six for me, it's the wrong name. It really should be called the Rich Six. I mean, I'm not saying this as I'm an Arsenal fan, but Tottenham are in the Big Six. They don't win anything. You know what I'm saying? They don't win trophies. They're not big. They're a big club. They're a rich club. They've got a beautiful stadium. They've got a big fan base. But they don't do that every year like the Big Six do. Now, I know we haven't won anything for 5 years, and of late it's dried up, unfortunately. But you look at our heritage and our history, it's winning 13 Premier League titles, Liverpool, Man United, even Man City and Chelsea, I know, albeit with money, they've come on the scene now, they're winning things. So for me, it's about how much money you got, not how much you win and how big your club and your fan base is and your heritage. Because otherwise, Leeds, Forest, Ipswich, Villa, they've all won European Cups. They've all been in these positions where you can look at trophies and lifting it up. But Tottenham, who haven't done what they've done, because they've got more money than them, class as a Big Six club. This is my point. And it's crazy.
I love the way you're having a go. You're just using it to dig at Spurs.
Well, it's got to be done, innit?
Yeah. Do you know what, though? These great rivalries we've got, under the surface, there's a commonality between us all, and we're all part of the same cloth, and that's got to be brought out and celebrated, because we've all met a friend of a friend before who said that they're not interested in football, and your heart sinks. You just got nothing in common then, and this is about all of us, mate, and we all support the same club, really, in a weird way. We all do. We all share the same qualities of human nature, passion, drive, commitment, loyalty. And this is what's been undermined. And now what we're probably at is the end of history, because if you're not in the Rich Six, as you put it, you don't win. You can't win. Even Newcastle are struggling to get in because they've got the backing of a state, which is just
billionaires.
A foreign state owns a Middle Eastern babe. I can't hear anything here. Sorry, she's quite. Where are kids? You're not picking up kids. Sorry about this.
Brilliant.
Well, I don't know what they're doing. They must have. They've got circus or something. Circus is in town. Circus is already here, mate. We're talking about the circus.
Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, I forgot where I was now.
Sorry, mate. It's me putting you off.
Yeah, well, we've got to realise that we're being frozen out here, and English football really doesn't belong to English people anymore. It belongs to the rest of the world, and it's owned by the rest of the world. We talk about the absurdity, weren't there? Yeah, the absurdity of Newcastle being owned by Saudi Arabia, but they can't get anywhere because of these financial rules. You're not allowed to spend big anymore, so it's trapped and it's frozen. Leicester are the only anomaly. We could talk about that now, actually, about the monopolisation process, because I talked earlier on about the bigger picture, and I talked about thinking big and thinking long term, and no one's looking at this. So I had to do this research myself. It's a failure of journalism, really. And we look at all I've done is look at how many points it took to win the Premier League. I've split it up into 3 decades. We're in the 4th decade now. Okay. In the first 10 years, the average was 80 points.
Okay.
In the second 10 years, it goes up to 87. And in the third 10 years, it goes to 91. But Leicester are the anomaly. So it's gone up 11 points. Leicester are the anomaly. They won it on 81 points, actually, in 15-16. So for whatever reason, that year, the monopolisation process just faltered. But in the 7 years after that, the points tally to win goes up to 94. And it should be 95. But City dropped 5 points when they'd already won the title a couple of seasons back. They played Calvin Phillips. Should have done that. I love that. He's another boy we should never have lost, It's a shame for him. He's still a great player. I'm sure he'll prove that was wrong. But yeah, you know, they dropped. They already won the title. They've got a Champions League final on the horizon. So what you've got to think about now, if Arsenal fans want to win the league, is can you get 95 points? Don't think about beating City. Think about the points tally, which means there's only 114 available. So you really, you know, you can only drop
near on
about
perfect,
20.
isn't you?
Yeah, you can only drop about. If you have a 5-game run, you know, for example, where you win one, lose one, and draw 3, you've just dropped 9 points. And it's not even a bad run, you know.
No, exactly.
Yeah, you could have played City and drawn with them. You could have won the next week, lost to Liverpool, you know, and then had some last-minute equalisers and just been a bit unlucky. You can't really do that again. You've got to win, win, win now. And it is for some context, you know, for Arsenal fans. That great Premier League team of, you know, the first time that Wenger won it, that was 98. You won it on 78 points. I mean, you'd be bottle jobs now, wouldn't you, on 78
Yeah, you
points?
would. Yeah, we would.
The season after that, you had Man United. They were champions of Europe, the best team in Europe. They won it on 79 points. You might remember the Kevin Keegan run. You know, I'd love it if we beat them.
Yeah,
That was 96, 97. Man United won it on 75. I
Crazy.
mean, Liverpool got 97 points and didn't win. City have got 100. They broke the 100 mark. They only dropped 14 points in an entire 38-game season. It's not competitive, you know. As a, it's just finished as a competitive kind of. So I'm getting a phone call there from a.
That's all right, mate. No
don't answer them. So yeah, you look at that. I mean, in the early 90s, promoted teams got finished in 3rd place. In 93 and 94. That's not going to happen now. The last time a team finished in the top 5, a newly promoted team, was Ipswich Town in 2001. Wow. You know, that's not going to happen this year because the gap between the best and the rest is widening all the time. Massive. It's just a scrap for survival now for about 10 Premier League clubs. While you know, it's a league within a league, or really it's just there's no competitive edge to the Premier League anymore because we've taken our eye off the ball, excuse the pun, about the bigger picture. No one's looking at the bigger picture or considering the cultural aspects of what's happening to English football and what it was and where it is now. And if we don't interject, if we don't do something about this, then like we mentioned that the European Super League, it's 100% happening. And English football has changed forever then. This, like I said, it's happening faster and faster. And the fair play rules are a joke. Yeah. The financial rules are a joke. Clubs are going into debt. And that's the irony, really, when you're using neoliberalism as your ideological kind of economic standpoint, you know, your system, then you're always going to get widespread debt. Even the big clubs are in debt. Everybody's in debt. And we've taken that as like a natural normal thing, but it's not. This is not business. Liquidations and administrations, they belong in the commercial realm. If your business doesn't do very well, you know, it goes out of business. Why should a football club be subjected to that? These are handed down through the generations. This is more than just a business. This is not a business. They should never be treated like businesses. They never were. Rule 34, stricter regulations. Control the financial landscape. This is sport, not business. You know, it's a ridiculous ideology. We've all just gone along with it. And the time has come now. This is in our hands, you know. You know, what I'm doing is treading a path, and what's happening to football fans is you're being trodden on, and you've got to stand up. This is the difference. You've got to stand up, and what I'm about to do now is hopefully explain how we can get out of this. And okay. I'm not trying to inspire hope. I'm trying to inspire belief. That's what it takes. It takes belief, because hope is that's what you have left at the end when there's nothing that can be done. But there's loads that can be done. And if we all come together, we win. It's that simple. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it, mate. Let's do it. So how can we change things? Okay. Before any social experiment, which is this is what this is going to be. It's an experiment. You've got to have a theory. So what I'm going to explain now is the theory. And then it's up to us to make it happen. You know, like I said, this is going to seem unbelievable. It's unbelievable in more ways than one. But hopefully, over time, we can normalize this. And, this is not going to happen next year. The best we can hope for is 2029. But the wider economic system is fertile ground for revolution. What we've got really is a similar position to the 70s. It's not working anymore. The country's bankrupt. We've got to switch. We've got to switch, and we're not switching. And that's the problem. We don't seem to be anyway. From the new Labour government, they don't seem to be doing anything different. And I think we do need something different. And this is, and I think a lot of people agree with that. And what I think I've got here is a way for talk about the wider political spectrum, is for left wingers and right wingers to come together on this concept, on this idea, because I'm calling it quantum politics. It's right wing and left wing at the same time. And I'll explain it now. Basically, what we need is to think about the governance of football, is to give it new intellectual foundations. So instead of authoritarianism, which is what we've got, over commercialization, individualism, and monopolization, which is what we see, we're going to switch to that democracy, community, integrity, sporting integrity, fair competition, and collectivism. And I think as soon as you say collectivism, people get scared. They think communism. But what we're doing here is we're going to ring fence the football sector. We're not talking about the wider economy. And this is what the Americans do. A lot of the regulation I've borrowed it from America. I've imported from America. So if you're going to call the Americans communist, it's a non-starter. And we're going to go back to what the Victorians did. This is sport. It's supposed to be a bit more even. It's not just typical business. We're not talking about the wider economy. We're going to ring fence a really tiny sector of the economy. We're going to ring fence the football sector, and we're going to take it. This is the idea. So the only way to change it is to think big, and is to change it systematically. All the problems we've mentioned are systemic. These are all systemic problems. So you've got to change the system, and the way to do it is through acts of parliament. We're going to have to set up a political organisation, but I'm going to argue this right now. It's there. The movement's already there. We just need to politicize it. All our fan bases, we all communicate regularly. We're all connected. If we can put our club badges together, then we win. It's that simple. The movement is there. We just need to politicize it. This is about changing mindsets. So this is, talk about the FA, the Premier League, the EFL. They've all got to go. It's time to don't listen to club owners. It's not in their hands. You can remove them from power. And the way you do it, we'll talk about Brexit as well very briefly. Now, I know it can be a touchy subject, but Brexit is really advantageous. What I'm in this scenario, what I'm proposing is illegal inside the EU. They've got regulation, the liberalisation laws, they call them. You're not allowed to you've got a data-free markets. You're not allowed to get a state monopoly, which is what we're going to do. There's loads of red tape and bureaucracy that we don't have to deal with. Because if we were taking clubs off private owners, they'd appeal to the European courts, and it'd be a really messy, drawn-out affair. That's all gone. So Brexit, this is what Brexit was actually about. This is what people voted for: national sovereignty, kicking out the unelected foreigners. That was what a lot of people were saying. That's what we're going to do. That's what this project is about. Not in a jingoistic way. I'm just talking literally. These people who own our clubs are foreigners, the big ones. They're all foreigners. And we're going to kick them out. And they're authoritarian. There's no democracy in English football. Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to democratise it. But anyway, we have to adhere to the European Court of Human Rights. It's an international treaty. And that says you can take property off someone. You can do it. You've got to do it legally, which is why we're going to do it through acts of parliament. And you've got to compensate them. And it's got to be done in the public interest. Now, the law is weighted on the side of the state because you get a wide margin of appreciation for deciding what the public interest is. So I want to mention HS2 now, which is, it might seem like a bit of a tangent, but it isn't. HS2 is a railway line from London to Birmingham. It was supposed to go up north, but It hasn't done. The contracting has been terrible, but it's cost £70 billion so far. The figure's rising all the time, but the people in the way of that, they were in the way. You know, their house was in the way. Their house gets taken off them. You don't have a say because it's in the public interest to move you. You do get market valuation, or usually slightly above for your house or for your property. That's how it works. HS2, 70 billion. You look at the Elizabeth line, so listeners in London, I know you've got a lot of gooners listening. You know, they'll be using the Elizabeth line, some of them. That costs 22 billion. It's only a small part of London's sprawling underground network.
Yeah.
You can buy every single football club in England for about a combined cost of between 25 and 30 billion. So it's really cheap. Football is culturally significant. It's massive, but economically tiny. So that's really advantageous. You can buy every single football club. If we get them at the lower end of that valuation, because it's variable. You know, it's not an exact science determining how much a football club is worth. Yeah, there's loads of factors. If we get them for the lower end, that's 2/3 the price of Track and Trace. Track and Trace was a spreadsheet that cost 37 billion. Wow. So, you know, I know. You think, you know, Liz Truss offered the energy companies 130 billion. I mean, it highlights the power of state spending and how much the government wastes, really, or has wasted. And let's put the figure at 30 billion. It's a lot less than 130 billion. So football doesn't cost very much. It's only a tiny sector. If you want to, you know, energy companies, we just mentioned them. If you want to nationalize energy companies, you're looking at 400 billion plus. I think it's a lot of money. You know, you want to nationalize football, 30 billion, less than a tenth. It's not expensive. So that's the first thing to consider. Football's cheap at state level. And by the way, the state is not going to own football clubs. We will. There's a new model of ownership called a public commons partnership, which means the state will invest in football and it'll have a small stake, maybe a 10 or 20% stake, and we will own the rest. So a public commons partnership, that's what football club will be transformed into, is owned partially by the state, but mainly by paying members, which will be us. And it's managed in a bit differently. They're integrated with local councils. So it's not a way of the council telling us what to do. We'll be telling the council what to do for land purchases and, you know, things we want to do. We'll have board members on there as well. You've got the Common Association, which is us, supporters of each club. And you've got the joint enterprise as well. And that's basically a body of experts in a particular field. So our football clubs will be governed by experts. They'll be accountable to us through the Common Association and will be merged with councils as well, so we can affect things in our local community. Now, the idea is that we're going to have tens of billions of pounds that we can spend. And how we're going to do that is ownership of broadcasting. I mentioned it earlier. There's a new, at the minute, this is how broadcasting works. The Premier League just sells the rights to legacy broadcasters all around the world. I say legacy broadcasters. We've been described as legacy fans, haven't we? Which is in the pursuit of outward commercial expansion. Which some of the terms they come up with.
Yeah, they do.
It's just ridiculous, isn't it? But anyway, legacy broadcasters around the world, they buy up the rights in their region of the world and they market it and sell the products to their, you know, in their region. It's a very fractured model. What you can do instead, and this has been suggested, Nick Harris is a great source on this, a good journalist. And he helps with the book, actually, Nick. As did Kieran Maguire, one of the, probably the leading expert on football finance. What you can do instead is set up a single digital broadcasting service. So you don't fracture it, you just do it from one source. 200 million people pay to watch Premier League football. If you charge them £10 a month, that's £24 billion a year. Premier League wages are, you know, £3.5 billion. This costs around 500 million a year to run. So then when you look at it this way, you go, what do you want to do with £20 billion? We could own this. I mean, and it's important that we do own it as well. The broadcasting is massive. This technology already exists. You stream it on the internet. Amazon have done it last week. They did it first in 2019. It works really well. The technology is there and the customer base is there. The MLS are in bed with Apple. Apple are doing this in the MLS. They can't afford to do it in the Premier League because the rights are about £4 billion a year, and it's a lot of money to set up initially. But they are looking into it, and the Premier League are probably going to be getting to bed with them soon. Amazon are probably the front runners, maybe Apple. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what we need to do is set up a digital tech platform and own it ourselves, own it collectively. So what I'm going to describe now is all the manufacturing processes around English football, and we're going to own them in a big, giant public commons partnership. So this will be one of the biggest corporations in the UK, because this is such an easy thing to think about. Gambling's everywhere, and runs the industry in so many ways. Well, the oil industry kind of runs football, which is, again, is just a ridiculous concept. But we're getting slammed with advertising for gambling companies all the time. It's big money in the UK. I think it's like 16 billion a year or something like that. Why don't we just set up a public gambling company that we all own and embed it in the private sector and allow it to compete? And that, when you're betting on within that company, that if you lose, the house wins, we win. I mean, Denise Coates is worth about 8 billion. She owns Bet365. She owns it with her brothers. So there's you become a billionaire if you own a gambling company. It's a really easy way of just, all the money in gambling tends to go offshore into foreign bank accounts. Why don't we just recycle it ourselves? All I've done is look at what do you do in football? You gamble. Well, let's set up a gambling company and all that money comes back to us. What else do? You drink. Why don't we set up a public brewery? This could work different ways. You could have one massive manufacturer selling to all the rest of the country, or you're probably better off if you had microbreweries connected to clubs. Arsenal would have their own, maybe a few. But the idea is when you scan the taps on match day, that beer pays back into football.
Yeah.
And we can also reduce the price of drinks as well, because we own the moral landscape here. What do you want to set up a brewery for? Do you want to make money, or do you want to put the price of drinks down? But the idea is that you decide democratically what you want to do. What else to do with football? We buy football shirts. Now, this is a really good idea in terms of, we've got to kick out Adidas, Nike and all that and just make our own shirts and set up the factories in England or in Britain. It costs more, of course it does, but you can run them as non-profit and just have the jobs, and also all the money, all the profit goes back to us. The maximum profit now is 20%. Only the big clubs get that. Nike and Adidas and stuff, they're making loads of money out of us. We can own that. And all the top 10 selling shirts selling clubs around the world, 5 of them are English. Arsenal are involved in this. You make a lot of money on this. We'd have to definitely set up some offshore. We'd have to go to Asia, really, plant a few factories there, because just to keep costs down, without exploiting people but paying less wages. But that gives us actually geopolitical leverage over other countries. Places like China's struggling actually for jobs, such a massive population. You can broker deals. Do you want 10,000 jobs in this city? That's 2 factories. So it actually gives us political power. And there's my mind's gone blank. We're just thinking about what else we do at football: shirts, broadcasting, gambling, and breweries. Yeah, that's about it. But also a social media platform as well. That's what I was going to say. We need to set up our own, because at the minute it's just run by, again, it's foreign billionaires. And you don't know, the algorithms are planned in a certain way. You don't know what these algorithms are doing, because it's all behind closed doors. All we need to do is set up our own digital tech kind of infrastructure. We'd have a broadcasting company and a social media platform that we own collectively. And this is great for the country. It's a great idea, because we don't have any digital tech. It's completely American owned. We're all American web servers. And I think there was a few glitches a few weeks ago. You might remember that half the country shut down because some American companies had some glitches. We don't have any digital tech infrastructure in the UK. In the 21st century, we're not exactly ruling the waves, you know what I mean? Not the digital waves anyway. Britain's in a sense of decline, actually. I think Europe is really, in general. Britain, more so than anywhere else, in my opinion. We've got a declinist mentality as well. It's time we went on the front foot. set up our own. It's about national sovereignty. This about independence. Set up our own digital tech infrastructure, and the good thing is we can make money out of it straight away. You set up that digital tech platform for broadcasting. You've got 200 million people already paying, and it's more like 500, 600 million around the world because they're watching on terrestrial or they're watching on hacking it online. But if you only have one source, it's harder to hack. So really, and because you'd only charge £10 a month, that 200 million people could be 400, 500 million. And that's what we've got to go for. This huge company that we own, and let's go make some money. Let's take our product directly to the rest of the world. The idea is simple: kick out all the billionaires and assume control ourselves. That's the basic premise of what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
And it's doable. There's a lot of lobbying power in the way. Of course there is. But, the first job of any political party, because of our political system, it's first past the post in terms of votes. Their first job is to win power. And they've got a lot. You do feel increasing like people are bought and paid for at the top end of our politics, Tories and Labour. But there's a lot of lobbying people who are buying them. And we've got to piss some people off to do this. But if we all stand together and demand it, and the book goes into how we can create and prep political pressure, this is more believable than you think if we get that mass support. And it's fertile ground for revolution right now. People are politically homeless. People are sick of the system. And this is a weak point in the system where we can take it. I'm going to mention about as well, this would be great for Arsenal, the fact that we've got these public common partnerships. A really good idea would be, because we've got this customer base around the world, we don't want to exclude them. We want to bring them in. So it'd be a really smart idea. My idea is here, £10 a month, you own your club, and £1 a month for the wider manufacturing. So you pay £11 a month, but you own a massive multinational corporation. And by the way, we could lobby our own government with that. This would be one of the biggest corporations in the UK. And that's where all the lobbying is done, by corporate powers. We become a corporate power here. So it's a way of democratizing and widening the public debate and loosening the kind of chains of centralized control, which is what we have now. It's kind of neoliberal communism really now. You don't even, a load of foreign people are telling us what to do constantly. And it's all this financial system is wider. It all seems so complex, doesn't it? But this is a really simple kind of small, tiny sector of the economy we mentioned about. It's not much money in terms of state spending. We'd be forking out 30 billion, but we could pay that back in 2 years. With the broadcasting alone. What about the gambling? This is a good economic plan. This, but I was mentioning about public common partnerships. I've got that ADHD thing that one takes time I have. But but the idea is this: we assume main control of our clubs, but if you gave away 10% to foreigners and charged them £1 a month, the amount of money you get in is incredible. So I'm going to use Man United as an example here, but arguably, Liverpool and Spurs and Arsenal, more so than Spurs, I will admit, they're similar-sized clubs with a massive international fan base. Man United have supposedly got about 650 million fans worldwide. If 500 million of those paid just £1 a month, that's £6 billion a year. I mean, Arsenal have been looking at something similar. And by offering them just a little stake in our cultural heritage, which is what football is, our cultural heritage, which has been diluted and commercialized and taken from us at the minute, then we can earn so much money. You bring them in emotionally and financially as well. What would you get for your £1 a month? We could give them some decisions in club policies. We'd be full members, but they could still have some democratic control, some power. Regular email correspondence, and also invite into our social media platform. That's how you access it. No one's anonymous. If you want to be anonymous, don't post anything. So, it's the idea of that everyone knows who you are and you're accountable. It's personal responsibility when you're going online. There's a lot of hate-filled kind of trolling, but a lot of it's anonymous people. If you actually, everyone knows who you are, I think we'll behave a little bit better online. I think I'll be a bit nicer to each other. But that's how you draw people in. We own all the digital tech infrastructure. We own the servers. Honestly, the dog is a Shih Tzu. It's tiny. Sounds bastard.
Sounds like a Rottweiler.
He does. He's tiny. He loves squirrels. He just He loves squirrels, mate. Anyway, but that's the basic premise of the kind of the ideas, and obviously we've got to change the regulation as well, Dan, because the way if you want to make profit, you've got to put a wage cap on. There's no other way around it, because otherwise Spurs spend 1 billion, Arsenal fans are spending 2 billion a season.
That's right.
United fans are spending 3, so Arsenal is spending. It just hyper wage inflation just goes up and up. But as soon as you say that, people think, well, if we do that, we'll lower the standard of English football because players will go elsewhere. We can't afford for that to happen, because 200 million people around the world, they ain't watching the Premier League. The main reason to do it is all the best players in the world. That's what we want to see. So we need to have world-class players in our shores. There's a way around it. First of all, there's 2 ways around it. First of all, keep Premier League wage bills really high. So at the minute, like I say, it's about 3.5 billion. I've raised it to 5.5 billion. So you pay really high wages. But the second kind of the second way we get around it is the American legislation. They've got the designated player rule. They use it to sign Beckham. So the MLS has always had a wage cap, but in 2007, LA Galaxy signed Beckham. The way they got around it, we'll have a designated player rule, they call it. You can sign 3 players outside the wage cap. Okay. So this is fluid. It could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 5. It's up to us to decide. But in this way, you can, let's say it's 5 players. You can sign 5 players outside that wage cap. As long as it's only like you've got to cap it. Maybe you can turn around and say 25% of commercial income. So you're not getting yourself into debt. But the bigger clubs would have a lot. Under this system, you could be talking billions of pounds a year coming into the bigger clubs. So you look at 25%, you could be looking at 200, 300 million a year. To spend on 5 players or 3 players. I've said in the book, I've said 3 players. You've got to limit squad sizes. You've got to limit. I've said 30 inside the wage cap, then 3 extra. You've got to do, otherwise you just get this hyper monopolization process where, like Chelsea, it's ridiculous the amount of players they've got. And what we've got to do, I think, and this is just a personal opinion, but it's about creating the debate really for a platform. It's a platform for a debate that don't exist yet. Is this book? We can decide this for ourselves, and there's greater minds than mine that will no doubt add to the argument. But what we've really got to do is we want world-class players, but we also want to see the homegrown lads as well. I think it's quite paradoxical, our support. We want to see the local boys. We
want to see the young lads do well, don't we, in our clubs?
We all do. Yeah. I mentioned you could see it you could hear it in my voice, sorry, when I started talking about Archie Gray.
Yeah.
It kills you that, and there'll be Arsenal fans probably won't recognise it so much because they're the ones you're at the top of the tree. It's getting drawn.
If we lost Saka, we would feel it, trust me.
You really would. And you know what? You're not the top of the pyramid. It's Real Madrid. And they will come knocking if Saka continues to develop.
Saliba as well. Saliba is a young kid. I know he's not one of our own, but he feels like it because he's been with us since 18 years old. We'll be the same. I'm totally with you, man.
Spurs actually are at the bottom of the top, if that makes any sense. Because Gareth Bale goes there, but if he does really well, he's up, he's gone. So, and this is how it is. I think we've got what I've come up with is a homegrown rule. I've said that you've got to field 2 players. Again, it's fluid. It could be 1 or 3, whatever. 2 players in the Premier League that were born in your area. So they've got to be born in certain hospitals. And then what you're forcing clubs to do is to look inwards. And if you can't produce good academy talent, your first team's got a weakness. And if one of them gets taken off, they've got to be replaced by another. So you basically, you're building in the cultural focus of homegrown players.
In your squad, you've got to have like 4 or 5 of these lads.
You'd have to have more.
More.
So you have a 33-man squad, but it will be connected with your academy. So you'd always have academy players coming through. You'd probably have 3 or 4. You'd have to have 4 on the bench. You would do, because if you'd forfeit the game, would be the idea. If you're fielding a player that's not, and it could be 3 in the lower leagues. I've said you've got to up the homegrown rule, because I've upped the wages in all the divisions, and you'd hollow out other leagues. You'd have, our 3rd division would be is under what I've done here is well paid. So you'd have loads of French League 1 players going to our 3rd division. You don't want that. You want the odd great player. Yeah, of course you do. But you want the homegrown lad, you want the cultural focus to be about locality. And that's what's gone out the window, really. It's about that fine balance between globalization, which is there are facets of globalization that are really advantageous. And one of them is, well, two of them are world-class players. It's great to have these world-class players. We don't want to lose them. And the other is the amount of the popularity of English football, of Premier League football on the global stage. It's a really good opportunity for us. This we can say thanks to Murdoch, but we'll take it from here. And it is a bit ruthless, but I think, like I said earlier, we're being trodden on here, and it's time we stood up and forged a new path towards the future. And I think that the country needs this. We need new political ideas, and I'm arguing that this is a really good one.
Listen, I mean, I love everything you've said today. Obviously, I had a bit of insight previously, and we've had quite a lot of engagement already from it. I'm going to read out some of these comments and some of these questions to you as well, Mickey, before we do come to a close, if that's all right. Excuse me, my voice is going. This is another Dan, Chelsea fan, on our show quite a lot. Big up to Dan. Make sure you're following BDB. Dan says this type of content is quality. Great show, Dan. Mickey has some great ideas to help us get the beautiful game back. I wanted to bring up a couple of other questions and comments as well. Matt as well has said, Mickey, when yourself says is he thinking state owned by us or every club to be 51% owned by fans?
So he's got that from the German model, which is 49-51. And so what I'm proposing is no, more like 80-20. So the state will have a small percentage ownership rights, but really it will be us that own them and govern them and manage them. It can be managed in the same way now. It's just the ownership rights will be ours. And how do you want to run it? That's up to you. It'll be up to the collective. You could even go, listen, the fans are picking the team, which would be ridiculous. You could even, and I'm going to argue as well, we should write a constitution for how English football as a whole should be governed, because that it protects it from political opportunities, and it gives us a framework, some guiding principles. But individual clubs, it's up to you. It's up to you how you want to run it. I mean, there are problems with democracy. This is not a utopian, because it creates loads of problems, just democracy. It might be a good idea, actually, just to go elections every 4 or 5 years and let the business people get on with it. You could vote out a manager, or do even, if fans let you, basically, I've got the idea, the mantra at Hearts up in Scotland is that they're fan owned now. The mantra is the club should be fan owned but not fan run, and I think that's pretty sensible, because I think fans, the way we are now, we're so cynical. We can't cope with losing, and I think the wider commercialization of football and the way that I think a lot of the advertising here is that winners are all that matter now. You see these images of like the winners are prestigious and perfect, and we can't cope with losing, because I think, this is only my opinion, but because English football and culture doesn't really stand for anything anymore. All we've got, we don't have anything off field. All we've got is on-field success. And when that's taken away from you, you don't feel like it's your club anymore, because the spiritual element, the spirituality of English football, it's over now. It only exists in our minds and in our hearts, because, technically speaking, we don't own any of this, and it's been trampled on, hasn't it? So I think we've all we're obsessed with winning, because we just feel so humiliated. We are so humiliated. We don't realise, and let's stand up and just don't accept it anymore. But I've forgotten where I was, but I was talking about ownership of football, wasn't I? Yeah, it basically, it's up for debate. How do you think a football club should be run? And do you know what? To everyone that's listening, no one's ever asked you how English football should be run. You've never had you know what I mean? We've never even been asked anything. There's no democracy here. There's no. We are so humiliated, like I said earlier, that we just accept any crumbs off the table. That what we define as possible has been limited, and what I'm suggesting is possible, and that's what I've gone with. Is this possible? Yeah, let's make it happen then.
No, I love that. Listen, we've got a couple of questions here from Halimi, who says, do you think football's becoming more for the higher middle class and upper class people as tickets are going robust, causing it to be a luxury to watch football? And he's also said the big six clubs are more powerful than the Premier League. If they wanted to recreate the Super League, they can, because without them, the Premier League is nothing. What do you make of this, Mickey?
Well, yeah, football is becoming a consumer entertainment package,
Mm,
throwaway entertainment package. The spirituality has been diluted. He's right about that. It's the gentrification of football. It's definitely more middle class. It's probably more than middle class now. Everybody listening knows people that can't get in,
yeah.
particularly in the bigger clubs. Do you know what? I've got a mate of mine down in London. He works in like the finance sector, and he gets corporates. So sometimes we're down to London, we go and do an away game. Went to
Nice.
Spurs, went to the new stadium, and it was. It's not corporate box, but they've got the big corporate thing. It's a massive stadium, and it's 300 quid a ticket. Got chatting to a guy in there. So I'm in the Spurs end. I kept my mouth shut when we scored. Do you know what? I'd give it a fist bump. I felt safe because I was surrounded by tourists. There weren't many Spurs
Yeah.
fans in there.
Yeah,
Got
I can
chatting to this
imagine.
guy, and he goes with his son. So he's a city banker, yeah. And he couldn't get a season ticket because despite this stadium being 60,000 people, they've limited the amount of season ticket because all they want is profit and corporate tourists, businessmen to be paying loads of money. He had to fork out for 3 seasons, right, for him and his son, $4,000 each. So it cost him £8,000 a year. He had to fork out 24 grand. I mean, what? That to watch
Mad.
his local club? Yeah, he could
Mad.
afford it because he's doing all right, isn't he? But
Yeah.
the majority of people wait in about a year. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. How most people don't is it's absolutely mad. Money has absolutely gone mad in this sport now
Yeah,
for sure.
you're right. That wasn't really a question. It was
Mm.
it was it was expressing his opinion and his right.
A
And
statement. Yeah,
and
exactly.
do you
Yeah,
know what? This whole like the big six and stuff like that, the clubs are more powerful than the Premier League. I think there's truth in that. But there's also a deeper truth. We can take all the clubs. There's nothing that the owners can do about it. There's nothing they can do. We can kick them out, legally speaking. We can kick them out. So
incredible.
let's start entertaining that idea.
It's incredible. Listen, last couple before we do close. Matt has also asked a question for Mickey. Do you think there'll be a shift with the Premier League implementing or tightening rules after this City case is done, regardless of the outcome?
No, I think it's smoke and mirrors. I think they'll pretend, but the monopolisation process is going to continue. The richer clubs they're ceding more and more advantage and more power to the richer clubs, and this is happening. It's really the top 10, top 12 across. You've got your 2/3 Spanish clubs. You've got the same in Italy, the Milan clubs and Juve, maybe Napoli. You've got your couple of German clubs, but it's different there because the fans do have ownership. But if you do set up a European Super League, the German teams have to come in. And if they do it over in Italy and Spain, the English teams have to join eventually. You're compelled. So, but what we've got to do is it's all about ownership. It's ownership rights. We've got to start standing up for ourselves and going, do you know what? This has been handed down through generations, and we've thrown it away. We've let them take. The Germans are really politicized. They would not be standing for this, but we're very passive. I think they've made children out of men, if I'm honest with you. And that might be a bit misogynistic to say that, you know what I mean?
Nah,
but
I'm with
that's
you,
what's happened here. It's time to stand up, and it's time to start thinking about bigger possibilities. All of this is possible.
Mm. No, I love it. Listen, this is the last question before we do. It's kind of two within one. From It's Me Everest said, I'd really love to see the old teams return to the Premier League one day. More funding should be provided to the lower leagues as well for their flourishing and competitiveness. Is there a way to nourish the lower leagues?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The model that I've got, that I've proposed, ups the wages in all the way down to you'd be playing semi-pro in the 10th tier, you'd be playing professional in the 9th tier, and it's about fairness, locality, and also it's the system I've developed is this: it's a way football clubs are all profitable under this new model. There's no debt, and it's a way of I talked about this 20 billion surplus. It's not fantastical. If we can convince this 500 million people that already watch English football to part with £10 a month. We're playing with £60 billion a year. Up the wages to £10 billion in the Premier League if you want. What do you want to do with £50 billion? It's a way of spreading it out through the football clubs. And when I say that football becomes a public service, members, each club then decides, what do you want to do with this money? What do you want to build? You know, how, and it's about local people in local communities and cities and towns deciding what to do with the money rather than faraway bureaucrats or distant politicians telling us how it is. It's a new way of democratizing money, basically. But because football makes a lot of money.
Listen, I love it. And I want to say a huge thank you to yourself, Mickey, for coming on. And I echo this comment from Matt. Great show. Nice to have something a bit more depth than the usual game review about the ref being shit.
They are shit, though, aren't
they? It's absolute fact. Look, I can't let you go without asking. Obviously, we want to try and get on board or get as many people on board as possible. What would you like the message to be to those that are quite interested or maybe thinking about what we've discussed today? Obviously, it's been quite a long show, but I want to kind of get something snappy at the end about what you would really like and how people could get involved in this or where you want people to send people to, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, mate. Well, yeah, first things first, like loads of people have been asking, what can I do? How can I help? The first thing is I'm trying to get on the podcast network. There's no budget. I don't want a budget for this. I want to speak to English fandom directly. So if you know anybody who's running a podcast throughout the clubs, then tweet them or whatever. Or if you know them, give them a nudge and say, listen, this guy's got some ideas. And I'm trying to speak to 10 million people. That's the aim, because I think that there are about 10 million who are that into it and who watch the podcasts and stuff. I think this is a great, like I said, the movement's there. It's just about speaking to the movement and politicizing it. And the idea is this: I'm not asking you to stand up and fight. I'm just asking you to think about it. At this stage, A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. This is how it's going to work. And if you want to get to B, the most important thing is the book says it better than I do. I've had a lot of help with this, and a lot of editors, a lot of clever people have been involved. And this, hopefully, the idea is you read this and you're radicalized. You read this and you've got belief. You believe in the idea, and we work through this in 2025 and we galvanize the movement. And that's the idea. Let's spread the word. And I know this is I'm speaking to the collective here, Dan, not the individual, but of course, people can't be asked with reading. Our concentration spans are so bad. We're all looking at screens these days. I'm the same. Since I've stopped writing the book, I've not been reading as much, and I'm struggling. I can sit an hour and watch a video on my phone, and an hour disappears. But this is about looking inward, mate, and improving ourselves. And I'm telling you now, if you read this book, I'm right with you. You're not staring at a screen, and it's a great investment for you. And I don't want to sound patronising, but reading has been great for me over the last few years. It's good for your mental health, and you take it at your own pace, one page at a time. And we're wasting our lives on these screens, Dan.
Yeah, we are.
Like we've done it sometimes, and this book's it's about investing in us, and just go for it, mate. We'll put the link up, and it's coming out in December, early December. So be a nice Christmas present. You can avoid the family. I'm reading a book. You know what I mean? Yeah, whatever. So yeah, let's just. I just want to say thanks for listening to everybody as well. It's a long show, and the four most important words in football. We can beat these. I'm telling you now.
There we go. Listen, that's a great way to come to a close. People, please make sure that you do us a favour. When the book does come out, I will be putting the link in and we'll be promoting it on all of our socials and throughout all of the YouTube platforms from 12th Man. So please make sure that if, like me, you've enjoyed listening to what Mickey has to say, that you're getting on board with this and at least taking it into consideration. Mickey, I'm going to keep you for a couple of minutes just as we do go off air to say thank you. But massive, massive thank you for coming on. All the listeners have really, really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for being on. I really do appreciate it, mate.
Cheers, Dan.
Top man. Thank you. Listen, guys, me and Mickey are going to have a quick chat off air. Thank you guys for being with us. Really do appreciate it as ever. I'll be back tonight on Rival Talk where we'll be doing more football chat. So please make sure you join us then around about 7 o'clock and we'll see you next time. Take it easy, people. Latest.